Okay, we'll go and get going. Whoever joins could catch up or watch the recording. I will, just like last week or 2 weeks ago, I'll go ahead and take the recording, I'll edit it a little bit, and then we'll upload it and send out the link. I also have a training file that's going to have the files that we're looking at today. So in the rent roll, I anonymized it or anonymized it. So no names, it's all discrete, but so you can use the actual MFA file that I'm using today. It's not released yet, so just keep that in mind, but I did want to show you a feature in there with that. And then it has the rent roll that is in this MFA file. The rent roll feeds the unit mix table that we're going to look at, and we're going to set a renovation strategy and walk through that process. And it has the T12 that we're going to map today. So all the files that we're using in the training today will be in this folder that I'll send out in the meeting notes tomorrow. Okay, so today's meeting, I get a lot of questions about T12 mapping, so I figured we're kind of covering the basics on setting up the file, right? Last time was the rent roll and processing the rent roll, especially if there are more than 15 unit types. This week, we're going to go over the T12 mapping, uh, and then we're going to go over the unit mix table and specifically the renovation section of that, making sure we understand what it is, the values that we put into the renovation and how that flows to the model. And then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so feel free to ask questions as we go. I have this rent roll right here, and I have the file, the underwriting file open. So one thing that's really important for the rent roll, let me go to the file real quick, the T12, sorry, the T12, I said rent roll. One thing that's important to notice are the numbers in these columns. So because the total for the T12 has to land in this column U, I've included these numbers so you could count the number of columns and know how many columns your T12 has and where to paste it. So I'll show you that process. Most often, T12s have 14 columns, right? So it's 12 months plus the total plus an item column. So this one lines up very nicely with that. Some cases, I noticed that there might be like 3 columns for the item. It might be like an income column and then an item or a sub item and then a sub item or something like that. So it's just paying attention to how many columns. And the way I do that is I will highlight from the total all the way over to the item. Oh, you can't see it. Here, let me move. I put it on my other screen. So I'll do this again. So I'll highlight all the way over to the total, and you can see right there next to my cursor, there's a 14C. That's telling me there are 14 columns in this T12. That I'd say 80% of the time there's always 14. But if for whatever reason you had 15 or 16, you want to make a mental note of how many columns there are so that you could paste it into the right column in the T12. So in this case, I have 14, and I'm just going to highlight these. Oh, see, this is a merged cell, so that's a problem. So you notice this account column, it is a merged cell. So I know that pasting this like this is not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all the cells and I'm going to unmerge here. So it's in the Home tab, Merge and Center. You can see it's kind of highlighted or outlined. That means there are merged cells in this range. So if I click it, it'll take out the merged cells here. Okay, so there we go. So now I have, and let's make sure. Oh, good. This is one of the, I didn't know this when I grabbed it this morning. I thought it was easier, but here we go. This is the problem I was talking about earlier. All right. So I have this blank column. It has some, so we're going to have to clean this up. This is actually a good example because this is probably the worst case scenario you're going to get on a T12. So this will be a good example to go over. So you can see I have like items across 4 or 5 different columns. It's just too many, right? I can't import that. I prefer them all to be in one column. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a look at this and say, well, where's my, I think it's column E because it has these titles and then it has the sub items or the item types here. So yeah, I think I'm going to I'm going to put everything in column E. So there are a couple ways to do this. You can just highlight, like let's say, okay, I want net rental income. I could drag it over to this column. You could do that. The quickest way to do it that I prefer is I would probably, let's see, do we have anything in F? Yes, we do. Right. So what I would probably do is just insert a column. So this is going to be my item column. Item. So I'm just going to concatenate all the columns that have information because there's no duplicates. So I just want whatever it sees in these columns right here, I just want it to list it here. So the way I do that is I just say equals this cell and, so ampersand, this cell and this cell and this cell. So it's concatenating the values from all those cells. And this should work because we don't have repeated items in these rows, right? It's either in this column or, but let's just see how that works. So this is kind of what I would do. Bring it all the way down to total expense. Yeah, net operating column. And then I do paste special values or formulas. I don't like to change formatting. And so there, that looks like it worked pretty well. We have one column that has the headers, the sub items, the totals. This looks very good to me. So I think that's the quickest way to do it in this scenario. Again, you can absolutely just go through line by line and copy paste into a single column. But the idea here is like I could, let me see how many columns there are. I did insert one, so I'm gonna have to subtract. So there are 18. I have 16 columns in my T12, so they're technically 17 if you include this income one. So I want to be able to paste this entire T12. I could paste from D over, and that's probably enough information. I'm going to paste everything here, but I really like it clean. I like to have one column for my item type. So that's why I did this step. So I know this is a little bit more advanced. Is there any questions over what I did here or why I did this?
Yeah, Craig, can you just show that last thing that you did with the special value thing? I couldn't quite see that.
Yeah, sorry about that. So what I do is I'll copy the formula. I'll highlight the cell I want. So let's just do it real quick. So I copied the formula. So there's a paste right here. And then formulas is this one, the FX. So the keyboard shortcut. So I tend to use the keyboard shortcuts. So I hold down the Alt key and I go E, S, and it brings up this. And then I keep the Alt key held down and I hit F, and that's formulas right here. So ESF is formulas. So just a little bit faster, but you can get there through this paste menu right here as well. Okay. And one more step, because now what's going to happen is because these have formulas in here that are referring to these cells on the sheet. Now, if I copy this T12 and I paste it into the underwriting model, these formulas are not going to know where to look, right? So it's going to break the formula, or it might put a link to an external document, right, into this rent roll or T12. So what I'll do, same process. I'll just copy this column, and I'll paste special values because I'm trying to get rid of the formula. Come on. So this is the values right here, and now super slow. So when I look at it now, you can see these are no longer formulas; they're just the value that the formula was returning. Okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay, so we'll go ahead and import that. So
Hey,
now,
Craig, really quick. Sorry, I was slow to get off mute there.
no worries.
One of the things that I see a lot on the T12s that I've been getting is that they'll put in just the rent values and they won't actually show the vacancy loss. Are you typically, would you would you recommend that we go in and put in the vacancy line item if they don't have one, or just use what they got and assume the GPR, just use that for the T12 and T3 and then model out the future years with vacancy?
Yep. The latter. Yeah. So I don't change any of the raw data, right? It is what it is. And a lot of times when you only see a rental value, that means it also includes all the vacancy loss and concessions and bad debt in that number. So it's more so your rental income number, not your GPR. So, and keep in mind, I should have started with this, but the T12 mapping as part of the underwriting process is entirely optional, and it doesn't have any impact on your underwriting. It doesn't feed any
Good point.
formulas in your underwriting. It's just there as a baseline reference. So even if I'm missing those vacancy loss and different things, I'll still map it because I kind of just want to see how that stacks up. And, I could still find value in it, right? For the total rental income, even if I don't have the vacancy loss. So you can make assumptions there in your pro forma. And then you can see expense ratios and just how the expenses are looking. So I still map it even if it's incomplete, just to kind of give me some baseline. But yeah, I've seen that quite a bit, right? Especially on the, I guess, if they're self-managing, I see that more often.
Mm-hmm.
Property managers. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything. So I've got this first cell item. I'm going to highlight everything down from item and over to total. So I'm just going to scroll all the way down.
So, Craig, I got a quick question. When you cut and paste, if you just do the cut and paste rather than the formula method that you were doing, you just want to paste the values, not the formulas. Is that correct?
Yeah. So which part are you talking about when I was trying to get rid of the formula?
Like let's just say we wanted to do the cut and paste and move everything into column G.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You just paste it with the values, not the formulas, right?
Yeah. So in that case, it doesn't even matter because these aren't formulas. They're all about everything over here is a value.
Oh, okay.
So
Perfect.
if you're going to consolidate, the way I would do it, honestly, I just click and drag. I'd probably click all these
Got
and
it.
then just drag them over. But yeah, whatever method works for you in putting them in the same column. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything. So I clicked the first cell of my T12. Remember, we have 14 columns now. And then I hold the shift key and I click the last cell, and that highlights my range for me. And so 14 columns. This is why it's important. We'll come back here and we'll look at our T12 tab. And I find the column that says 14, right? So that means there are 14 columns between here and here. And my T12 had 14 columns. So I'll put my cursor in the first cell right below that 14 and I paste. And now I have my T12 imported or pasted into the model. So now we have to go through and map it. So I'm going to try and make this bigger and kind of bring it to the center here. So the mapping, the way it works is you have a set list of categories for income and expenses. One thing that's really important, I think this confuses people and I apologize for it, but I'm trying to segment this list into like income and expense items. And so what I did is I put these 3 asterisks around the headers, right? So this is rental revenue. So we don't actually select any value that has the asterisk, and then everything below it is a rental. Here's the other income or income thing. Here's the other income, the 2 items below it. Effective gross income is a total line. So with all the equals, and then operating expenses, and everything below that is an operating expense. So this kind of aligns with the exact same structure that's in the underwriting model. And so we'll just start going through and we'll just map each section here. So this one, fortunately, this T12 is pretty clean, at least in terms of their categories. So concessions, we got bad debt, pretty clean. So that's it. And then other income. So sometimes other income and rubs are separate categories, and sometimes they're together. I'm sure you guys have seen that a lot. Looks like this one has done this. It's separated them out. So it's a very nice T12. It's clean. So when it is separated like that, I don't have to map each individual line item here. I just map the subtotal to other income. And that's going to capture the subtotal amount. And my computer's really slow right now. Yeah. So it captures the subtotal right here instead of adding up each individual line item. If the RUBS items were included in here, I'd have to map each RUBS item individually and then each other income item separately. Oops, sorry. And we'll see that in expenses here in a second. But it's just easier to map the subtotal if it's convenient. RUBS, this is interesting, right? So there's a couple ways people treat RUBS. So I've seen it multiple ways. I've actually had a conversation with a pretty big property manager this week about how best to treat RUBS, because some people may just look at the water sewer expense and compare that against the water sewer utility. Some may include trash and pests in that. You see in this T12, they included trash. They have an electric reimbursement. It's pretty small. A pest reimbursement, and then another resident utility reimbursement that has it's pretty small as well. So the one thing I would say is that you need to be consistent, right? So if you're going to map the trash reimbursement, and this is a different category than valet trash, right? So this is actually the trash reimbursement. If you're going to map that to RUBS, as we've done here, then you need to make sure that trash expense is in your utility and expenses, because sometimes trash might show up under a contract service, right? So you want to make sure that your utility income is mapped to the same categories as your expenses for those utilities. Otherwise, your RUBS ratio is going to get out of sync. So I think it's just very important. If you're going to map pest control into RUBS, and pest control oftentimes shows up as a contract service. But you see right here, my utilities, if I just map my utilities, there's no pest control in here. So now I'm going to be counting pest control towards my RUBS ratio, but it's not counted in my utility. So you have two options. You can either include pest control in the utility, or you can map it as other income and exclude it from the RUBS. It's just really important to be consistent. And the conversation I was having with the property manager is that they're more inclined to include it. However, they have noticed a lot of operators are taking profit on sometimes trash, but definitely like pest control. They're taking a profit on that. And he said, at least in Georgia, is the state we were looking at. In Georgia, there's some legislature being drafted to outlaw that, to say that operators cannot profit on any of these kinds of fees or utility, which includes application fees. He said you cannot profit on an application fee. So something to be mindful of. It's just like if you're including, I'm more inclined in this situation. I'm going to exclude pest control, because I know usually the pest control bill back. Actually, if we go down, let's see, contract services is probably here. Pest control. So they're being charged $775, $695, $704. So they're actually not, well, let's do an average. Let's look at the T12. So I'm just trying to figure out, are they profiting on the pest control? Because if they are, I probably don't want that in my RUBS. So it's 717, 7717, pest control, 60. So they're not profiting on the pest control. So actually, maybe that makes more sense to include it into the RUBS. I'll probably leave it as long as it's not showing a profit, because that would definitely skew your ratio up, maybe above 100%, which we don't want. So I know this is one of the things that's one of the more challenging things to map in the T12 to get a good clean baseline. All right, so I'm going to map again. So now we're on to, oh, sorry, I forgot one step. We've mapped all the income items, right? So we've mapped rental revenue items, total other income. We have utility. I'm going to map the total income to this effective gross income total. And what that does is it will compare all the items mapped above it versus this total. And you can see the top line in these columns is green. That means the sum of the parts that are mapped for income match that total. So if it turns red, so let's say, for example, I'm just going to go ahead and take out general vacancy. And you'll see right now it's red. So that means we're not tied out. And if I look at this table, it's just a little data quality table. You can see both all the T1, T3, 6, and 12, none of them tie out, and you can see the amount by which it does not tie out. And so oftentimes if I'm missing something, if I forgot to map something, I'll look at the T12, 196, and then I'll kind of scroll this column for 196. And you can see right here, looks like I forgot 196. It matches. Let's see if I mapped it. Nope. You got to map that. And then you should see it turn green. So that's why we map the totals, just to make sure it ties out. Okay, expenses are usually easier to map than the income because we can most often map the subtotal instead of each individual item. So like I said before, we're including pests up above in RUBS. So I want to make sure that I map that to a utility here. So that everything else here is contract service. So here's where so now instead of mapping the subtotal, I have to map each individual line item because I'm splitting these out between different categories. And what I'll do is I do this pay special values a lot. So now all my contract services are mapped. On this one, so sometimes repairs and maintenance could include turnover or make ready costs. So what I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to scroll down just to see if they broke out make ready. Oh, good. There's a turnover expense. The T12 is really good. Nice and clean. So I'm going to map the subtotal on this one. Repairs and maintenance. And then advertising. So we're just going through the list, just mapping all the subtotals. General administration. And then I'll show you a couple tricks that I do after I get done mapping it. Turnover. So hopefully, like if you've done this a few times, hopefully it doesn't take you that long. It probably takes me no more than 5 minutes. If it's really clean like this, I mean, it's really just a couple minutes. But sometimes, you know, it doesn't always work out. Okay, so we got management fees here. And then it looks like we're combining property taxes and insurance. So that's typical. So I just make sure we just got utility bond, other taxes. We'll just put the taxes here. And then we'll go ahead and map the insurance. Okay, so if everything's right, I should be able to map my total expense now. And it should turn green up here. And it didn't. Well, that makes no sense. Did my calculation change? My computer is running so there's so much lag when I do Zoom, so it's hard to tell what's going on. I mapped the income. Okay. Yeah, my bad. See, trying to rush. There we go. It's all green. That's good. So let me pause. We just mapped this. Are there any questions over that process? Hopefully it's pretty straightforward. But what this allows the model to do is now it can pull these values, T1, 3, 6, and 12 into the underwriting model. And just a word of advice, some some of the T12s will be rounded off, so it won't have the cents, so it'll just have dollars here. And because of the rounding, there's sometimes a rounding error as you aggregate the values, and these will stay red. And so what I'll do is I'll look at this table, and if it's off like on this income, it's $2.2 million. If it's off like $1,000 or $2,000, I'm not going to sweat it. Again, it doesn't affect the model at all. It's just for baseline, and that's a pretty small margin of error, and it's usually due to rounding.
I had a quick question.
Yep.
I had a broker send me something that was more along the lines of a T7 and
Yep.
kind of struggled to get that mapped over. Do you have any
Yep.
tips for that?
Yeah, I've had the same thing. So I would map it exactly like we did, but the only difference is these formulas are looking for specific time ranges really within this T12, right? So you're going to know that you can't rely on the total, and you can't rely on anything greater than a T, in your case, a T6, right? So the T12 values are probably not accurate. So what I would do is I would map it, and then in the underwriting model, which we'll take a look at in a second, is I would just toggle it to either a T3 or a T6 for the income and expenses. Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay. So one thing I want to show you guys, this is just a little tip. I'm going to actually make a video about this, one of my quick tip videos when I get time. But what I do a lot is like, there's a lot of data in here, and it's really hard to look at sometimes. But what I want to look at is some big trends just to see what's going on with the property. So one thing I do is first thing, this is net operating income. I mean, I could look at the data and kind of get a feel for it, but I use this conditional formatting a lot. So let me show you what that looks like real quick. So what it does is the low values, it turns red, and the highest values, it turns green, and different shades within that. So you could kind of get a sense for where you had really big, large numbers and small numbers. And I have this added as a quick menu item. But the way you do this, let me do this for the expenses so I could show you the menu. So it's in the home. There's this conditional formatting, and you can click this down, and then there's these color scales. So within the color scales, you can see it's really hard to see, I'm sure. So this one shows green on the top and red on the bottom. So that is going to take the highest values in that range and turn them green, and the lowest value in the range and turn it red, and everything in between, right? Or you could do red high, green low, or you could do various shades of red. So if you want red high all the way down to white being low, so you could pick different color, whatever suits your needs. I usually focus on the green and red one, the top two here, because they have the most contrast. So I can see the value. So I meant to go to the menu. And so on expenses, I usually want to see red high, right? So the highest number, I want it to be bright red, and the lowest number, I want it to be green. So, and it corresponds very nicely with this net operating income. So one thing I'd be like, I'd ask a question about is like, why are my expenses so low in this month, and why are they so high in this month, right? So I'm going to go up, and I can immediately see right here, we had we had some kind of tax thing going on, property tax prior year, but it netted out. So I'll probably highlight that. And this is the other thing. It's like on these bigger categories. So I usually do this with repairs and maintenance. I'll show you one. Let's go to repairs and maintenance, because this usually has a lot of categories in it. So I'll trend that just to see what it looks like. See, I've got a big month here, and then I want to see what the biggest categories are. What's driving the number? I'll just trend that, and then right away I can see plumbing services and supplies, and then I'll look across this and like, where did we have some of the big numbers hit? So I'll just start to pick it apart like this using the colors and try and figure out like, well, what's driving the changes? And you can see really big plumbing expense here. Plumbing, sometimes I'll just say, okay, well, plumbing on the T12, it's 23%. plumbing is 23% of the repairs and maintenance. That's pretty high. I'd probably ask the broker, I'm like, hey, we need more information on this item. Well, what's driving the plumbing expenses? And then I probably look at the OM. What kind of mechanicals do they have? Is it like cast iron plumbing or galvanized, or what's going on? Maybe the building's older, has some issues. But these are the kind of things that you kind of want to pick through the T12 a little bit and try and understand. And I'll do the same thing, really important, on the income, right? So the GPR, like what are they doing? That you can see that they're steadily increasing, right? Because it goes from red left to green. And then what is that doing? How's the overall trend? It's kind of sporadic. So, wow, really low month here. It looks like it was bad debt. Wow, that's a really big bad debt number. That's really big, yeah. So what happened? And sometimes you could look in the late charges. You could look down in the general and admin for eviction fees. Maybe there was an eviction. Right, so you're just trying to piece together what the operations of the property. Where's the general and admin? So here we go. So here we go. We have a $3,000 eviction. It's the highest month in this month. So yeah, it looks like they had quite a bit of turnover, but that bad debt write-off, they must have had these tenants going for a long time without paying and finally evicted some. But I start preparing a list of questions for the broker based on this type of information. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a preview of how I look at the T12 sometimes using the colors. Any questions? And we'll jump into the underwriting.
Hey, Craig, I had a quick question.
Yep.
So, for the line items where they're turning green, the T12, T1, T3, T6, T12,
Yep.
do you have kind of like a rule of thumb, like on the variance, like if one doesn't turn red? Like I know I've had it before, and I remember like, you stated in your videos too that like, hey, it's okay, it's not,
Yeah.
if it's not perfect. But do you have maybe like a rule of thumb?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes, I mean, it's really frustrating when one of these turns red, especially if it's a T3 or T6, right? T12 is easy to find because you just look in this column. But when it's a T3 or T6, it's a little bit more difficult. And sometimes, I mean, I've seen rent rolls where the sum of the parts don't equal the subtotal. Like I've had several rent rolls where that happens. So what I typically do, I look at this table. I just look at this table and I say, okay, well, I know personally that I tend to use T3 income, and I typically use T12 expenses as my baseline. And so I'll tend to look at these and I'll look at the variance in that and say, well, is that something I can live with for my baseline? Or I'll just make a mental note and say, well, hey, I'm 100K off on the T3 and I can't quite figure it out. There's something going on and I don't want to spend the time to figure it out. Just kind of make a mental note. You can make that adjustment in your underwriting model if you choose, but typically it's just for a baseline. And usually I don't put a lot of I try not to put a lot of weight in some of the items in the T12 because you just don't know. Some of the T12s are pretty bad. Like we just got one on a pretty big asset, but it had zero repairs and maintenance in it. I'm like, I still mapped it because I want to see some of the other categories. What are they paying on payroll? What are they doing on advertising? Things like that. But yeah, so it's just looking at this table to answer your question and understanding what that variance is and if you can live with it. If it's off like a couple 100K here, I'm probably going to spend some time trying to track it down because that will impact my decision making, I think. And I tend to like everything to time.
So Craig, could you help unpackage a little bit? Why are you looking at the T3 income and then the T12 expenses? What's the logic behind that, and what's
Yeah.
of it?
So the shorter time horizon on the income, because income changes pretty rapidly, especially, I mean, maybe a little bit less than the last few months, but like when rents were going up, right? Oh, actually, it's still good because I'm starting to see more rent decline in the number. I'm starting to see more bad debt. So you want to be able to count. So the income is more of a picture of like how is the income trending like right now on the property or over the last 3 months. It's also more aligned to what lenders will use when trying to size your debt. So I mean, I just got a quote where he used T1 income, annualized T1 for his loan quote. So it's just a more current snapshot of the income of the property, like how it's actually performing. But T12, because expenses come in waves, like big bursts, right? Repair and maintenance could go up and down and up and down. And so you want to look over a longer period of time to just kind of normalize that, get a clearer picture. So it depends on how they run their T12, but sometimes you'll see the tax payment in a lump sum. And sometimes it's spread out over the 12 months. Same thing with insurance. And like I said, repairs and maintenance tends to be the one that swings it the most. So that's the reason for shorter window on the income, longer on expenses. Okay, great questions. Yeah. Anything else before we jump into the underwriting? Okay. So this, again, we're not underwriting a deal here. I'm just showing them the mechanics of the T12 mapping. And so here we go. So now that we have the T12 mapped, what it does is it pulls in here. And again, the T12 mapping is entirely optional. If you chose, you can just input the values here manually or not at all. It has no impact on your forward-looking, your pro forma, or your underwriting. But now that the T12 is mapped, you can use these toggles. Let's say you wanted to kind of compare like T3, T6, right? What the heck? There we go. Just so much lag. So you could toggle it, right? And it's giving you the T6 annualized now for these total rental income figures. You know, it's interesting. So that's the other thing. I'll do after I map it, I will kind of do a quick data quality check. I will scan these. I do this quite a bit. I scan this and I scan my expenses just to see if anything is way, way out of whack, right? If I see my repairs and maintenance at like $1,500 per door, that's super high. I probably mapped some make ready into that. Maybe I mapped some contract services, just kind of give me some guidelines. But right now I'm seeing there's no loss to lease. I'm like, huh, let me check that. Because I thought market rental, yeah, there's no loss to lease in this. Yeah, okay, so that's accurate. That's unusual, right? Usually we see some kind of loss to lease between GPR and the total rental income. So, okay, that's what's in the data, so I know it's accurate, at least according to that T12. And then same thing with the expenses, kind of give it a cursory check. This payroll looks kind of low to me, just based on guidelines, just based on what I know for the area as well. And then one thing that's always usually going to be low are your taxes and insurance. So a lot of times when I start to have a conversation with a lender, you'll be like, hey man, we're taking T12, but we're using current tax and insurance to generate your debt quote. So I'll literally come in here and I'll type over what I believe taxes are going to be based on my research and insurance based on my research and quote. So I'll input those figures here, and then that will give me operating expenses, and it will also give me the NOI that the lender is looking at to generate his debt quote, because that's what the debt service coverage ratio or your LTV is going to be based on. So I'll make some changes, some adjustments as we get further along. But that's a good baseline, and now I can do my pro forma and kind of gauge, look how the property is operating. And anytime I see something strange in these numbers, like I'll hop into the T12 and I'll go through this process of, okay, so my other income looked really, really high. What's driving my other income, right? I'll do that analysis. So I kind of go back and forth to understand, what's happening in the property. And I think it's important because that's also how you understand what opportunities you may have or risks at the property based on the current operations. All right. Well, that took a few more minutes than I expected, but all good. Any questions on T12 mapping?
What does the off and on in the mapping So like other income value add off. Is
Great
that just
question.
turning that one off?
Yeah, so it's a topic for a future date. It's on my list of topics, but I will give a preview here. So this specifically, this other income value add, you see I have a comment here. Here, everything is so slow. Okay, so if so there's a worksheet in this model that allows you to model other income value add, right? So if you want to add assigned parking, or you want to do lock boxes or package lockers, or you want to do washer and dryer income, and you want to model that like a CapEx, right, project over time, you can do that with this other income tab. So right here, I just have some values in here as placeholders, just playing around with it. But you can see I've modeled covered parking. Hey, we're going to add 40 units. We're going to start installing those in month 4, and I expect to be done. This is random. This is not real data, right? But I expect to be done in 21. And we're going to start collecting income on that in month 6. Right. So it's going to take us 2 months to get the first set of covered parking rolled out. We're going to spend $2,400 a unit for this covered parking. We expect to make $40, and there are no monthly operating costs associated with that. So what it does is it calculates your ROI, calculates your net income for year 1, your gross income, your operating expenses, and the CapEx schedule. Right. So this is a way you could kind of model your other income. And the on-off switch that you saw over there was a way to pull this data into your model, right? So that's what I've tried to do in this model, is I've tried to make sure that you can underwrite a deal in the underwriting model without touching any of the other tabs, right? So I want to make sure that all the other tabs support the underwriting model, and that you can pull the data into the underwriting model if you choose, right? Pull or push. So that's the reason for that. So one thing that is valet trash, right? 152 units. We're going to start at month 2. We're going to roll it out in approximately a month. We're going to get $25. It's going to cost us 8 to run that program, and our monthly net revenue. And there's no ROI because there's no CapEx involved, but you can see the income impact. So this is really a valuable exercise because it helps you model your other income, but also helps you understand the impact, right? So I can tell you, and again, totally fake scenario, but based on this scenario, we're adding about $400 of net income per unit per year, which is about $35 a month. And that is going to increase the value of our property by $1.3 million. So really big impact. And so model the other income, I could come back here and I could turn this to on, and we'll pull that other income value add into the model. So you can see here's the 110K. It's adding to your other income. It also adds the expense. So if you have any operating expense, like we saw, it will add the operating expense to your expenses below. And then also in your renovation, it will add the CapEx costs, right? So this is the cost of building the covered parking, the washer and dryer units. It adds that all into your CapEx, so you could raise the money for it.
Got it.
For your renovation costs. So that's that one. There's others you see here. There's a payroll. So there's a payroll worksheet. And if you want to do the math, like actually figure out your payroll here, you can. You can say, we're going to have this staff at this salary with a bonus and burden rate. It calculates your payroll per door. And then you can choose, okay, yeah, I want to use what's in the payroll worksheet, right? You click it to yes, and then it updates. Or you could turn it off. If you turn it off, it puts back whatever was in the cell prior to turning it on. Same thing with taxes. You can model your taxes. And this one's a little different because you can model your taxes over time, over a 10-year hold if you want. And then if you choose to bring that in, you just turn this to yes, it'll bring in your taxes from the tax worksheet. Turn it to no, it just uses this value.
Got it. That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you. That
Cool.
helps a lot.
I have a question on the partnership splits. Does it assume on your returns that 30% GP is bringing in capital and 70% is LP, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way it kind of works is that this is the partnership split. But if if a GP is investing in the deal, they'll be investing alongside the LPs, right? So when it comes down to the partnership split, which is down here, yeah, let's go. Where am I? Sorry. Returns. Okay. So the GP, if they invest in the deal, they'll be investing, they call it pari passu. They'll be investing right alongside with the LPs, the way this model works. I do have a more complex return structure. I haven't baked it into this model yet because it is complex, but sometimes you'll see the equity contribution split out, and then they'll model the GPLP on different tiers. So you see that more often in IRR waterfall. But for this preferred return waterfall, it's just GPs are investing alongside. So it could be 0 or 20%, however you want to break it out. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Craig, back on the value add topic, is there any resources that you would recommend to kind of go through different value add opportunities, and then, what kind of income you could expect for each value add idea per month, maybe?
That's a really good question. Actually, I just got this book. Can you see it?
Oh, cool.
I literally just got this yesterday on
Nice.
Amazon. I'm studying up on it as well. I mean, I think so this is kind of tough, right? Because the way we underwrite, at least at CRE, is we don't want to have to rely on other income value add to make a deal work, right? We want it to work, and we want that to be, because there's a lot of variability in that other income value add. You don't really know how many people are going to sign up for a covered parking spot or things like that. So I have seen some deals lately where it is the other income that like pushed it over, like that helped them to hit their returns. But at least for us, it's everybody's different. But I think most of the other income value add stuff, you, when you start looking at like rent rolls, I don't know if this rent roll had it in it. A lot of times rent rolls, yeah, this one doesn't. But some rent rolls will have all their other income items broken out. And what I'll do is I'll pay attention to that a lot. Like, what are they charging for just reserve parking? What are they charging for garages? What are they charging for some of the other amenities? But it's yeah, I don't have a comprehensive list yet.
What was the name of that book?
It's How to Add Value Handbook for Commercial Real Estate.
Cool. I'll check that out on Amazon.
Yeah. I just bought this one. I bought another one of his. I think it just arrived yesterday as well. Haven't opened that one yet. But it's about structuring debt, the capital stack. So
Nice. Thanks.
So, Craig,
Yeah.
when you're packaging a deal and kind of presenting it to your investors, would it be a good thing to split out your other income? Maybe present, hey, this is what the deal looks like without the value add, and this is what it looks like with.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally personal preference on how you present it and what you think your investor's appetite for that detail is, right? Because some investors are pretty high level and some really want a lot of detail. But yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to do it is part of your CapEx strategy, right? A lot of people have a CapEx strategy of we're going to do this many interior renovations. This is the rent premium we're going to get, the ROI. Here's what we're going to do for other income. I see washer and dryer income a lot on these things that have connections, but they're not actually placing washer and dryers in the unit. So, and then you say we got a list of other opportunities for other income that we're exploring. I saw a really good OM a while ago where he listed all his other income and then he put the probability low, medium, high for each of them. And then he did some kind of weight. It was pretty advanced, but I made sure to save that one because I thought that was pretty cool. Any other questions?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. On the can you go over real quick the gross potential rent override? I remember talking with you about it, and then I completely forgot.
Yeah. It's a great question. I don't think we're going to get into the unit mix today. I think we're running short on time, but it has, it basically, yeah, let me bring this up. Right. So, let me just start by explaining a little bit how the model works, right? And I'm just gonna do this really quick. We're not actually explaining this, but I need to put in a
You're good.
renovation.
Just a quick run through. You don't have to go into
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna put in a renovation just right now, just to be able to articulate this point. So this is kind of how I do my renovation. So what I did is this is a really good one because it already has renovated units. So I don't have to really guess at what kind of rent they're receiving for renovated units or would receive because they already have it in place. So what I did is I just said on the non-renovated units, I'm setting it equal. I'm just doing 100% renovation of classic right now. So equals that number, the number of classic units just for the classic unit types. And then I put in $12 here, and I'm assuming my renovation is going to be $12 a square foot. Just quick math to get something in here. And then my rent premium is going to be the renovated unit minus the classic unit because they're already renovated. That's the premium they're saying they're receiving. So there we go. That's my renovation strategy really quick. That's what I do just to see what the ROIs are, see if these renovated units are achieving an ROI at this cost. Maybe the cost will be $10 a square foot, things like that. That's looking a little bit better, but can we really do this? Probably not for 6,500. So anyways, now I have a renovation. So what the model is doing right now, the model is taking the current rent, it's seeing the current rent, and then let me just expand this top section because the timeline for your renovation is very important. So I'm starting my renovation. Let's do it in 3 so you can really see. I'm starting in month 3. We're going to finish the renovation in month 24. We're going to do 5 units a month. That's our schedule. All right. So now what the model is doing is it's taking these units, these 28 classic units at this rent, and starting in month 3, it's going to pull units off of the rent roll for 2 months. And then it's going to roll them back onto the rent roll at this post renovation rent, this 1236. So it's going to take them from 1101 to 1236 in 2 months. And it's going to do that over your entire timeline. So it's going to linearize your renovation. So these 28 units will get renovated over the course of from month 3 to month 24 with a 2-month renovation period that it moves into a renovation vacancy. So that can be seen. I made this visual here so you can see this graph right here is that process, right? So the dark green, these are our non-renovated units. It could be either a previously renovated unit that we're not touching or our classic units. And then starting in month 3 right here, you can see this red, that's our vacancy or our downtime, renovation downtime. And you see it stays red for 2 months, and then we start to roll these units here in month 3. We start to roll them back onto the rent roll in month 5, so 2 months later, at the post renovation rent. So it's doing that for all those units over time. So that is how the model is generating this number, this gross potential rent number for year 1. So it's doing that for 12 months, aggregates everything up, and that's your gross potential rent. And then it generates your downtime vacancy. So you can see what a lot of people do in their underwriting in different models, right? Is they'll model out their renovation kind of like this, more or less. They'll determine what their rent is after renovation and this GPR number. So this 2.979, that's usually the number that gets loaded in year 1. And then they'll add a vacancy or a loss to lease, usually a loss to lease to kind of like throttle it back a little bit. But in this model, we're actually doing the math, we're calculating our renovations, and we're able to generate these numbers. However, you don't have to use that logic. So getting to your point about the override is like that's what the model is doing. That is the entire purpose of this unit mix renovation strategy, is to set up the model so that it can do that math over time. But if you don't want to do that, you can use this override. Let's say like, no, I want to do the other method, right? I want to load it all in year one, and then I want to back it off using loss to lease because I'm comfortable with that. You can take this. This is your post renovation rent right here. This 1411 after all units have been renovated. I could put this right here, 1411. There we go. And you just overrode the entire model. Like all the logic that goes into rolling those units and calculating, you completely overrode it. Right. So you see it took out the renovation vacancy and now it's set your year one GPR pretty close to this, right? There must be some decimals here, but so now you can actually plan out your, let's say, and I know by year two, based on my renovation schedule that I determined, that we're actually going to be at 1500. So I could put that in 1500 year two. And then what the model does every year after that, it's using your growth rates below, right? Or you can overwrite it. Say, no, we're going to be at 1600 by year three. And then you can see your growth rates down here just to keep track of it. And say you're like, yeah, no, I changed my mind. I want to go back. I want to use what the model's providing. You just delete it out and it puts it back. Similarly, like let's say, yeah, and you could do this at any stage of the renovation. So the renovation schedule, that GPR Logic, it's a 3-year timeline. And then after the 3 years, it uses the growth rates below. So let's say just from year two, you're like, no, I know we're going to be at $1,500 in year two for gross potential rent. You put that 1,500. So now it's using the model, the logic in year one, but year two and beyond, it's using whatever you're putting in here. So long-winded answer, but I really wanted you to understand how the model's coming up with your GPR, and then when you override it, what it's doing to the model. It's actually canceling all that out.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And yeah, I'll do that too. I'll play with this override quite a bit actually, because sometimes I'll put in what the broker says it's going to be just to see. I'm like, oh yeah, he says 1450 on this year. What's that do to my returns, right? Start playing around. Great question. Yeah, I know that's an important piece of the model, right? Because this number, this gross potential rent, this is the biggest number in your model, has the most impact. So it's really important to understand how that's being generated and then spend some time on making sure you're comfortable with those numbers. Yeah.
Real quick, what was the formula when you on that on the rent roll up top? You put that 12 bucks or $10 a square foot. What was the formula there?
Yeah, so I just put this in as a placeholder as the cost per square foot.
Oh, okay.
Renovation. Yeah, and then in this formula, I just said equals the square footage for this unit type times this dollar amount. And then if you see the formula up here, it's got the P25. I hit the F4 key on my keyboard and it does the absolute referencing. So it puts the dollar signs in it so that when I copy that formula down, it will still reference this cell.
Okay.
And then as always, I always paste special values or formulas. So in this, I'll paste special formulas. And then you just paste it down. And so now this formula is looking at that square footage times the dollar per square foot here.
Sweet.
And so,
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, we'll cover this probably in the next one, but I really want to show you guys this. This is kind of the first pass that I'll do. Like I'll do the quick underwriting. Yes. I'll do a really quick first pass on my renovation plan just to see if I'm getting close. And then the two things that are super important for your renovation plan are dialing in your rents, right? So for that case, I have rent comps, right? So I spend a lot of time on rent comps. Right? I want to see where we are relative to the competition. And then I really like the scatter plot lately. I've been using this a lot because it just tells me that although we might be towards the top here, cost per square foot would top, but if you look relative to all these different assets, we're pretty high. We're way above the average line. That might not be a good thing. What's it look like for the 2-bedroom? Oh, we're way above on the 2-bedroom, right? So that could be problematic, right? We don't want to be a market leader, especially not, this is 1980s asset. So this is a deal we really actually looked at pretty closely, but we ended up passing because we just couldn't get there. So, and then the other piece, so dialing in those rents, but the other piece we'll cover is the repair detail. So I did this quick repair estimate. You know, it's okay, but like if you really want to get detailed in your repair strategy, it's really coming into this worksheet, picking the unit type that you're going to renovate, and like making some more detailed estimates. So I could tell you right here, I kind of leave this stuff in here because this is pretty typical for an upgrade, and then you can change if you want. But this 1-bedroom, we're at $12 a square foot. So I could already tell you this is going to be higher than what I put in my underwriting model. And it shows you that here, right? It's $1,300 higher. Total cost 37. So you come through and you just do this for each unit, and then you can model your exterior. So we'll go through this whole process. But I will pause here for any final questions. And again, I'll leave this. This is the model that's in the training folder. I'll leave this filled out like it is right now. And if you want, you could come in here and check it out and play with it. I have the repair detail done. I have the rent comps done in this model for this. This is a real deal. And then rent roll summary, everything's done. And then the T12 mapping. So if you want to come in here, clear it out, follow the video and do it yourself, or just to see what some of the inputs are. On this model, I haven't done any of the pro forma stuff. So it's not a fully underwritten deal, but as far as these parts are concerned, the T12 rent roll unit mix, they're pretty good. And rent comps, repair detail. Oh, that's why the return. Yeah, so I just noticed the returns just looked better than I expected. It's because this other income is on. It's fake. That other income's not real. There we go. That's more like it. Okay. Any other questions for you guys?
I know we're kind of running out of time here, and I really appreciate you going through this with us.
Yeah.
I'm underwriting a deal right now in Colorado Springs. I did like a Pew Matrix to kind of narrow in on that market. But what I found is there's like a lot of new development there. And I'm trying to understand like how that could potentially affect the vacancy and maybe even the market rent of this C-class asset with a lot of these A-class assets, you know, coming online nearby. Is there any like quick, you know, tips or tricks could recommend for a situation like that?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm trying to find let me find a report real quick. I was just looking at this, right? So we just got presented a deal in Reno, and Reno's not really on our list, right? But so I was kind of wondering what's going on in Reno with the market. Come on. Yeah, and I pulled a CoStar report for. So this is where a CoStar report is really helpful because it'll show you the difference between asset classes and what's happening, at least up to now with vacancy and what they expect to happen in the future. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. I think
Yeah, I actually
so.
got the broker to send me the full underwriting report for this asset as well. So is that kind of what
Yeah.
you look at to get your projections?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I was like, and the feedback that I've been hearing as well is that like the C class assets in terms of vacancy is not nearly as impacted, right? There might be some
Yeah.
bleed over to the B class.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, vacancy. So this is what I was looking at today, right here. So one thing to note, this is Reno. See all the blue lines? Those are new assets coming online in the future. And then there was key statistics right here. Wait. absorption. I forget where it is in this report, but what it was saying is that 8% of the total, like 8% of inventory will be, or the new units that are coming online account for about 8% of the market inventory. So it's a fairly high percentage, and that will definitely impact vacancy. But what I thought was interesting was this graph right here. So you see obviously the 4 or 5-star properties, the new ones coming online, they need to get filled up. You can see it's pretty high, but 3-star, not as high, and Reno in general, right? So I think what we're seeing is vacancy is up across the board. I think across most, like all asset types in most markets. But definitely if you look at a market overall, I think it's that new product that's coming online that's really pulling the overall market average up.
Got it.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Really interesting. Good question. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, I will download the video once it's available and hopefully get that sent out to you guys tomorrow with a link to the folder with all this information in it. Let me know if you have any questions. I think we'll cover the unit mix and renovation piece next time. And plus, I have a list of topics. I'll have to pick something maybe a little smaller that can fit into that time window. But if you have any other ideas for topics, send them my way and I'll put them on my list and we'll get to them eventually.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Craig. This was great.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Great. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.